Hey quilty friends, guess what? We are starting Machine Quilting 101 today. You guys have been asking, how do I use quilt stencils and quilt on a domestic machine? I've got the Loving Wishes quilt here, I've got my quilt stencils, and we're going to be going over how I do it. So come join me. So for our Machine Quilting 101 series, I'm actually going to break this up into several classes for you all so it's not overwhelming to you. We're going to be using the Loving Wishes quilt for each of the segments, so that way you guys can see how I quilt a quilt step by step, and that way you can see the process of it all. We're going to start with just the basic simple quilt stencil today, just using this 3-inch heart design today, but we're going to be also in the other classes showing how to use the walking foot, doing borders and stuff like that. So you will also need a marking tool. I did a marking tool video, the pros and cons of each marking tool. If you're interested in that, I'll link it down below for you. That way you can find the right marking tool for you. I am going to be using the friction pen for this class just because that way it doesn't disappear on me while I'm working on the quilt. You'll need machiners. Those are the quilting gloves, and they give you some grippy texture to help move the quilt around while you're quilting, especially when we're doing free motion quilting. You might need a ruler, so have that handy. You're going to need thread, and I'll go over that with you, and some scissors. I already have the Loving Wishes quilt basted, so I'm using the Warm and White 100% cotton batting. You can use whatever batting you like, and I also have it backed. I picked this sweet fabric from the Ellie collection. This is by Brenda Riddle. I thought it went really well with the Grace collection that I have for the top. I didn't have enough of the green Grace fabric for the back, so that's why I used the Ellie collection. And you will find that designers do that. They'll have several collections that you can mix and match with, which is great. That way, if you don't get a quilt finished, you can find one of their other collections and know that you can mix and match and add it in if you need to. So to get started with, the first thing we're going to be doing is marking our stencil. So I'm going to get everything cleared off so that way we can get ready to do that. All right, we have our stencil and we have our marking pen ready. So I am going to show you how I do this. We're going to start in the heart. And remember, once you have your quilt basted good, it doesn't matter where you start marking. Because what I am doing for this one, since it's just baby size, I'm going to pick where I want to work on this, just so you guys can see the process along the way, okay? So I'm starting with the heart, and I'm going to place it the easiest way for me, like the quick and easy way, is the top of the heart. I'm going to line up with my seam line because I'm just going to, as you can see, like this heart is kind of small and awkward. I'm just going to be using 3 hearts out of this heart design. I'm not going to use this top heart here. So we're just going to be doing the right, the bottom, and the left heart. And all I do is mark along here, just tracing the lines as I go. And I tend to mark like in the direction of how I would quilt it, so that I'm already getting in my head the direction that I'm going to go, so that way my mind will remember what I want it to do. So there's, as you can see, I'm just going to do like 3 little hearts here. So that's another thing, you guys, you don't have to use, like on this design where there's 4 hearts, you don't have to use all the hearts. You can just use like 1 heart if you want to. But like this, I wanted to do 3 hearts. So that's how I marked it. And then I'll go along and I'll go ahead and mark my other ones to have them ready. And I will tend to go ahead and quilt them too. I'm going to also mark on the white, so that way you guys can see how it looks on there, so it shows up good for the camera. I'm going to later on be coming along and doing an outline quilting, and since I already know that I want to outline these stars, I'm going to come out a little extra to allow for that probably 1/4 inch that I'll be outlining. So I'm just going to eyeball it here. What I would normally do is do all my centers first, and then I would outline quilt, and then I would come back and place these in. But I'm just showing you that, guys, this part, so that way you guys can see it, so it shows up good for the camera. And like I said, I'm going to mark this in the direction that I would naturally quilt it, which means I'm going to start from the center, and I tend to work clockwise. So I'm going to start in the center, go around the heart, and go back to the center, just so I can already get it in my head how that design is going to work. So it's kind of like you're creating a little memory ahead of time. And that way when you sit down to quilt, you already have the idea of the flow that you need to do. But see, that way you guys can see it clearer. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my machine set up, and we're going to go over the thread, and we're going to go ahead and start machine quilting. So let's talk thread. For the thread, I like to use embroidery thread. I like the slight sheen that it has. It might look really shiny on here, but it's not that shiny. But I just feel it gives a better definition to your stitches, and I really don't mind my stitches showing. I like my stitches to show. It can take a straight stitch. This type of thread just makes it look more luxurious. Just has a pretty sheen to it. If you don't want your stitches to show, if you're new to quilting and maybe you're just a little more timid, you can use your regular Aurifil thread, your 50 weight Aurifil thread. You can use all-purpose thread, whatever you want to use. It's really your preference. I always use the Aurifil thread in the bobbin. I'll use the rayon, the embroidery thread. This is rayon thread. I'll use this for my top thread, and then I usually just use the Aurifil thread for my backing, for my bobbin thread. You can change out colors if you want to use white. I'm using white for most of this quilt because of the majority of it is white. I'll probably use pink for the border and stuff, but that's your preference. You can always use a natural color, a beige, or you can even use dove gray, which pretty much blends with any color. For the needles, I like to use the Microtech sharp needles. These babies are sharp. They're my favorite needle. I use them whether I'm piecing or machine quilting. They just give such a nice clean stitch when they're going through the fabric. So I've never had problems with them. For the foot, for our free motion foot, we have our darning foot. This one, my favorite, is the open toe foot. As you can see, it's open right here. There is the closed toe foot, which it would be completely closed with just a hole in the center. This, I like the open toe because I like to be able to see where I'm going. I just like that better. If you have trouble with your tension on your machine, you might want to switch to a closed toe foot when you're free motion quilting. Sometimes just that closure will help control your tension if your machine has trouble with it. So what we need to do, I've already got my machine threaded. I'm going to put my free motion foot on and screw it in. If I can get it in there. It's hard to see at this angle. There we go. So also, I have the extension table on my machine. This came with the extension table. You don't have to have an extension table. I quilted many quilts on just a regular size sewing machine. So this just makes it easier to have both hands level. That's the main thing with having the extension tables, that both hands can be level when you're holding your fabric. So that's up to you. You can buy extension tables aftermarket to fit your machine. Or if you have a sewing table that your sewing machine sinks down into, you can always do that. Also, when we're doing free motion quilting, you're going to want to lower your feed dogs. And just remember this, you don't have to have an expensive sewing machine to do free motion quilting. All you need to be able to do is stitch a straight line and lower those feed dogs. That's all you need. So that's what we're going to be doing. We've got our feed dogs lowered, our machine's ready to go. I'm going to put on the machiners, move my thread out of the way, get my machiner gloves on, and like I mentioned before, these have a little bit of grippy texture, and that just helps give you a little bit of extra control when you're holding your fabric. So we've got these on. Now, I will also put on my glasses so I can see. I will line up, I'm going to start in the center. So when we're doing especially this kind of a cute little closed design, as in it's not a continuous design, it's a closed design, we're going to be stopping and starting. I'm going to start in the center, I'm going to work my way out, and then I'm going to come back to the center. So then I'll go back around the heart and come back to the center. and then back around a heart and come back to the center. So that's where we're going to start and we're going to stop. And what I want you to think is we're just going to keep a steady movement. We do not need to go fast. This isn't about speed. This is just about a steady motion. So you can go slow and steady. If your machine has a speed control, you might want to knock your speed down to like halfway. That way you can get used to doing just a steady movement. And we're going to place our hands where, like I'm going to be tracing around the heart, we're going to place our hands so they're out of the way, but yet we can still control to get back to the center where our heart is. So that way, if we have our hands too close, then we don't want to take a chance of the needle coming near our fingers. And we also don't want to lift our hands up while the machine is running. Okay, because that's when you're going to get loose stitches and skip stitches and stuff. So anytime you need to move your hands, you're going to stop sewing. And anytime you need to start sewing, you're going to take a stitch wherever you are, and then you'll start moving out. And because we're taking that stitch where we are, that's going to help secure the stitch so that our tension will be right as we move along. Okay, so let's get our thread under the foot and out of the way. We're going to lower the needle where we want to start. And I like to sew without shoes on. I've got one shoe on, one shoe off. But I'm going to take, well, even here, we could just take one stitch, because what we're going to do is pull up that little bobbin thread, because this way it is out of the way. I don't have to trim that later. I can just pull it up out of the way. If you don't want to pull it up through to the top, that's okay. You don't have to. You can trim them off the back later. It's all right. So we've got our bobbin thread to the top. I'm going to lower my needle back down where that bobbin thread is. Swing my threads to the back. I'm going to take a couple stitches just to secure. So I'm just kind of like staying in the same spot just to secure where I am. And then, so we remember, we're going to hold our hands, one on the left and right. I'm already looking ahead to see where I'm going to stop. So I'm going to go around the heart and I'm going to stop back at the center. All right, and we're just going to keep a nice steady movement. And then as you guys get used to it, you'll know what speed you like to work at. So I'm just tracing along. And it's okay if you're not exactly on the line, because once those lines are gone, nobody will know. And we've gone back to the center, and that's where I can stop. That's where I can lift up my hands. Okay, so we're going to do it again. I'm looking now. I'm going to be going down to the bottom and around. So we're just thinking a steady movement is all we're doing. And just make sure, you know, that your quilt isn't dragging over your table or anything, so that way you can move it easy. Crib size, baby size, these are easy to work with because they're not big and heavy. Once you get to the bigger quilts, you're going to have to learn to nest and build them up around you. Okay, so we've got our hands positioned. We're ready to go. We're going to take a stitch, and then we're going to work our way back around. And there you see I went a little bit off the line, but you know what? Nobody's going to know that, because once I hit the friction pin with an iron, those lines will be gone and nobody will know I wasn't exactly on the line. And these threads here, we can raise up our presser foot and trim those threads at any time and get them out of our way. Okay, so now I'm going to be going to the left, out, and back around. Okay, got our hands in position. We're ready to go. Okay, so I'm back at the beginning. I'm just going to take a couple extra stitches and then I'm going to cut them off. So here is our first little heart design. If you guys can see that, let me kind of hold that up to the camera. Do you see like how just a little bit of that sheen on that embroidery thread just makes those stitches pop so pretty, don't they? So now let's go ahead and do another one. That way you guys can see one that I do that has all 4 hearts on it. So like I said before, if you've got your quilt basted good, you don't have to worry about starting in the center and working your way out. A lot of times you do that to help prevent puckers, but I've got my quilt basted. I'm not worried about puckers or anything. So I'm just moving over here and I'm doing this part. This way you guys can see how it looks with all 4 hearts. So got my thread out of the way. We're gonna start in the center. Now this particular design doesn't have the center marked, but you guys can eyeball it. You guys can see where the center is. We'll take a quick little stitch, bring up that bobbin thread, get it out of the way. That way we don't have to trim it later. I'm going to put my needle back in that hole. And then I'm going to, now you guys can work any way you want. If you guys like to go counterclockwise, go that way. If you guys like to go clockwise, whichever way you guys like. I'm going to be going clockwise, so I'm going to start over on the right. And remember, we've got our hands in position because that's what's guiding us. We're going to work all the way out and back to the center. Now, if you have to stop, wherever you stop, remember, when you start back up, just take a stitch in that same spot to secure it and then move on. So I'm going to take a couple stitches just to secure where I am because I'm starting out. And then I'm going to work out and back to the center. And I'll go on to the next one. And see that the nice thing about having that stopping place is that's where I can move my hands, reposition to go to the next thing. So anytime you're working with any kind of marking stencil, that's the nice thing is to always look ahead, think, okay, where do I stop next? That way you know where you can move. I need to get those threads trimmed because they are going to be in my way. These are trimmed. And I've got one more heart. I tend to get a little bit slower when I'm going backwards just because I can't always see exactly where I'm going. And take a couple of stitches and cut my thread. And there's our next heart. So you guys can see that. Let me hold it up for the camera so you guys can see that. And then we'll do another one. I think you guys have got the hang of it. So what I'll wind up doing is I'll wind up finishing the hearts. And then the next step would be to do our outline quilting with the walking foot. If you guys are probably familiar with using the walking foot. We'll lower, take one stitch to bring our thread up. And remember, you don't have to do this. You can very easily, all I'm doing is pulling that top thread. I take one stitch, pull that top thread, and then I can grab that bobbin thread and pull it out of the way. And that's just so I don't have to trim that thread later. So don't feel like you have to do that. And then we'll go through this. that's it. So that's how we do just a little closed design for the quilting. It's pretty easy. Now we're gonna hit that friction pen ink with some hot heat and make those lines disappear, because I want you guys to see how pretty this thread looks. So I do have a wool pressing mat underneath. That way you guys don't think I'm doing this right on the table. I'm gonna move over. That way I can get this next spot, but I want you to see this. And remember, if you start your fabrics first really good, you're not gonna have to worry so much about that friction pen not coming out when you wash it. But look, can you guys see? There's just a slight sheen to the stitches, and it just makes it look so pretty. I don't know if you can see on the pink so much, but I just think the embroidery thread really makes those stitches pop and look pretty. And as I said, you can use any kind of thread you want. If you just want to use the regular cotton thread, that is going to be great to blend in and not show so much if you don't want that. So I really appreciate you guys for being here. Thanks for joining our Machine Quilting 101 class. Be sure to like and subscribe so that way you don't miss our next class. And let me know in the comments, have you guys ever used quilting stencils before? Or is this going to be like your first time using them? So I hope you have a wonderful day. Until next time, enjoy quilting.